Chapter 61, Traces in Front of the Church Nullify Regeneration? Gu Fei pondered about the effect of his Chinese broadsword's new trait. Werewolves were common folklore creatures, so their character design and game should not stray too far from the original. He had never heard of werewolves having the ability to revive themselves, so nullify regeneration might not necessarily mean the power to prevent werewolves from reviving themselves. Eliminating that possibility, Gu Fei was sure that the term referred to the werewolf's fast wound recovery. In gaming terms, that would be regeneration. Bosses that had regenerative abilities were a common sight in online games. The damage I deal with one strike is less than the rate that the monster regenerates was a description players usually used for this sort of bosses. Gu Fei figured that his Chinese broadsword's new trait should have that sort of effect. Gu Fei headed towards Ziu's location after bidding the village chief farewell. The door to the mansion was wide open, but Gu Fei saw no one inside. He sent Ziu a message to ask for her whereabouts. Ziu soon replied that she was retrieving gold ore from a cellar in the backyard, so he made his way there. Could this mansion have a mine? Gu Fei arrived at the backyard and approached Ziu, who was standing beside the cellar's entrance. "You managed to buy a weapon this fast?" Ziu asked. "I met a player selling equipment by chance," Gu Fei lied smoothly as he handed over the sacred flames of baptism. "This weapon isn't half bad, it even adds magic damage. It's just right for me since I have low strength." This was a cop-out Gu Fei had prepared from the beginning, as he would have to reveal the Chinese broadsword to Ziu sooner or later, especially if he had to join forces with her during a fight in the future. It was better to tell her upfront now, so she would assume that he had just purchased a sword and would not suspect anything. Gu Fei believed his lie to be foolproof, considering how simple-minded Ziu was. Nevertheless, he still felt the slightest pang of guilt for lying to a straightforward girl like her. Ziu received the Chinese broadsword and looked at it carefully. She indeed did not suspect a thing, truly not bad. "How much did it cost you?" 50 gold coins, Gu Fei replied. "That's expensive," Ziu exclaimed. "I didn't have a choice since I want to carry on with the quest quickly. I'd rather buy that than waste time going all the way back to Chai City. I would be upset if this quest had a time limit," Gu Fei explained. Ziu nodded her head in agreement as she fully understood Gu Fei's sentiment. Quest was the #1 priority in game no matter what. She returned sacred flames of baptism to Gu Fei and said, "We'll pay Chief Edwin another visit in a moment. I've already visited him." This weapon's name used to be Flames of Baptism. After Chief Edwin plated it with silver, its name changed to Sacred Flames of Baptism. It also has a new trait called Nullify Regeneration, Gu Fei narrated. "What does that mean?" Ziu asked. "Maybe, it prevents monsters from recovering HP," Gu Fei said, unsure. "Oh, I better write that down." Ziu took out her booklet and started to jot it down. Gu Fei did not know how to react to this. "It's only my guess." Hearing his words, Ziu wrote down, "Nullify Regeneration, prevents monsters from recovering HP." She added a guess beside this line of words. "Why are you just standing here?" Gu Fei asked. "I'm waiting for that guy to retrieve the gold ore." Ziu pointed down the cellar. Gu Fei peered into the cellar but only pitch darkness greeted his eyes. He could not make out a thing in the darkness. Could there really be a mine here? Gu Fei mumbled to himself. A cough traveled from the cellar as a person holding a small bag climbed up the wooden stairs. The person coming out of the cellar was no doubt a NPC. His hideous face displayed a broad smile similar to that of a pesky in-game merchant's. This was obviously Mr. Adrian, the wealthiest man in Yaguang village. Mr. Adrian emerged from the cellar and threw a small bag to Ziu. Gu Fei looked inside the bag and saw that it was filled with unrefined gold ore of various sizes. "Is your quest completed now?" Gu Fei asked. "It'll be completed once I take this back to Yunjuan City," Ziu answered. "What's the reward?" Gu Fei questioned. "Don't know yet," Ziu replied. Ziu's quest was not the slightest difficult, only requiring her to travel far. But the amount of time spent to do it was enough to frustrate anybody, so it would be disappointing if the reward was just a paltry sum. "I'm done with my quest, so I'll help you with yours," Ziu said as she put the small bag into her dimensional pocket and patted it. Gu Fei nodded his head as he looked all around. "Don't know who that werewolf could be," he said, feeling rather helpless. "Let's ask around." Questing is all about talking to NPCs until you've exhausted all their conversation options and finding the clue within their words. Ziu lectured Gufei. It was somewhat tedious. Although Yaguang village was not large, many NPCs still lived in it. From east to west of the village, Gufei had asked about 20 different NPCs, excluding the ones who completely ignored him. In the end, the only answer he got was, "The village chief knows more about this." Gufei and Ziu listlessly made their way once more to Chief Edwin's hut. Chief Edwin just repeated his previous monologue, which covered the general introduction to werewolves and their connection to the full moon. The game indeed had a day and night cycle. 6 hours would constitute a full day in Parallel World, with 4 hours being daytime and 2 hours being nighttime. At nighttime, the darkness was not bad to the point where players could not even make out their 5 fingers. It was stated that the moon provided players light, allowing them to see the roads or identify the monsters. And yet, Gufei had never concerned himself with the phases of the moon in-game. Ziu was unaware of it as well. Gufei looked at the time. The two had crossed the Oolong mountain range at around daybreak, so it was more or less 3 hours since then. Meaning, it would be nighttime in an hour. There was a possibility that the system would initiate the full moon phase to suit Gufei's quest. Let's go to the church again and take another look around the rocks, tall grass, and such. We might find something that will reveal the werewolf's identity, Ziu suggested. Gufei thought that her suggestion sounded reasonable. Logically speaking, any such items should have long been found by the other villagers. But for the sake of the quests that players needed to solve, those items would be left untouched for them to find. They returned to the blood-stained stone slab near the church's doorstep. Ziu immediately sprawled on the ground and carefully checked the area. Gufei felt a little conflicted. If this was part of the quest design, then clues pertaining to it could only be found by the quest holder. Could Ziu find anything by sprawling on the ground like this? Seeing how enthusiastic she was to help him, Gufei could not bear to be a wet blanket and got on all fours as well. He started searching the ground just like Ziu. Gufei stood up in front of the church's battered door after searching the ground for a full round and coming up with nothing. In contrast, Ziu was relentless and even increased her search radius to include a far corner. Gufei stared at the area he had just searched. The two had practically combed every blade of grass and overturned each slab of stone. Yet the system restored everything back to how it was after a bit. This was how the game usually worked. Anything the players moved or touched would be restored to its original state barring special conditions, but if an NPC did the moving, the system would view it as an internal reshuffling and would never revert back the changes made. At this moment, Gufei watched as the scenery reverted back to its original state from where he was standing and felt stunned. He was unsure if it was part of the design or a clue specially left behind, but he could see some remnants on the ground of a past battle. The broken stone slabs, the trodden grass blades, the broken shrubbery, were definitely not naturally formed. This place must have borne the brunt of a battle. Gufei stepped down from the elevated platform and went over to inspect these traces in detail. Scenes from a battle would occasionally flash through his mind. Gufei concluded that these battle traces were the real deal. He did not believe that this scene could be produced through programming or drawing. This place must have been created without these battle remnants. Afterward, an intense battle had been fought here, leaving the traces behind. In the end, they became what he was seeing right now. However, it seemed rather ludicrous to utilize this as a quest clue. Gufei doubted if the average player could discern this. Even the game designer might not be able to recognize that a battle had once taken place here from the marks alone. Gufei himself was not able to do so that well. He could only extrapolate that the battle had been fought fiercely with swift and frequent attacks. Gufei soon had many questions circulating his mind. The indications suggested that the two parties had fought for quite a while before one of them succumbed. By the looks of things, it seemed as if Murphy was quite the brawler. Gufei, however, recalled that Chief Edwin had described Murphy as a kind, righteous young lad. There was no mention of him being a fighter of sorts. Gufei instantly remembered the official website's statement regarding chain quests. It stated that every generated chain quest in Parallel World represented the game creation team's blood, sweat, and tears, with complete storylines and plots happening in real time all around the players. Based on this statement, unbeknown to the players, the system had simulated Murphy's death by the werewolf using all the necessary events in real time. It then sequenced the plot accordingly, including Eddie's capture by the mountain bandits. All of this happened in the game in real time and was not merely a backstory. Murphy's identity had suddenly become dubious. Ironically enough, Gu-Fei's doubts were centered on whether Murphy truly existed or not. Had the programmers thrown two random NPCs to fight by the church entrance and faked everything for the sake of the plot? If that was the case, Gu-Fei, who had managed to determine the traces of the battle, was thoroughly fooled. Whatever the case might be, Gu-Fei had decided to treat this discovery as a clue and continue upon the trail. He promptly called back Ziyu, who was still digging in a corner. "Did you find anything?" Ziyu was audibly excited. "There's something. We're going to visit Chief Edwin again," Gu-Fei answered. "What for?" "To ask him exactly who Murphy was," Gu-Fei replied. Chapter 62, The Missing Murphy. Gu-Fei and Ziyu left the church and visited Chief Edwin once more. "Chief Edwin, how was Murphy, the one killed by the werewolf, as a person?" Gu-Fei got straight to the point. "Murphy was a kind-hearted, virtuous lad. He was loved by the villagers, so many were saddened by his death," Chief Edwin commiserated. Gu-Fei specifically asked him about Murphy's fighting skills, yet the latter only repeated his previous words. "Where is Murphy buried?" Gu-Fei asked. "He is buried in a graveyard behind the hill south of the village. It is where all the dead villagers are interred," Chief Edwin answered. After inquiring about all this, Gu-Fei and Ziyu strode out of Chief Edwin's house. They quickly headed to a general store in the village, bought a metal shovel there, and made their way to the graveyard's location. "What are we doing next?" asked Ziyu as she eyed the shovel. Although Ziyu was a natural airhead, she was still able to guess what Gu-Fei planned to do. "Dig a grave," Gu-Fei replied honestly. "Why are we doing that?" Ziyu asked. "Murphy's character seems a little fishy to me," Gu-Fei answered. "What's fishy about his character?" Ziyu curiously asked. "He seemed to be great at fighting, yet the village chief doesn't know about it," Gu-Fei answered. "Then, how do you know about it?" Ziyu continued inquiring. It's just a hunch," Gu-Fei said to her simply, as he did not know how to explain his intuition. "Oh." Ziyu actually accepted such a vague answer. Ziyu was apparently not afraid to do anything for the sake of questing, as the idea of exhuming a corpse did not even elicit a shred of fear in her. The two arrived at the graveyard by the southern hill. After finding Murphy's engraved name on one of the tombstones, they began digging close to it alternately. A brown coffin was soon unearthed before their eyes. Gu-Fei stuck his shovel into the gap between the lid and the coffin and called Ziyu for help. The strength-based Ziyu reached out for the lid and pulled it up. The cap was easily separated from the casket. Thinking that it had something gruesome inside, Gu-Fei immediately covered Ziyu's eyes with his hands as he scanned the contents of the coffin. "I'm not afraid of seeing a corpse." Ziyu peeled off Gu-Fei's hands from her eyes and peered into the coffin as well. Why is it empty?" Gu-Fei fell deep in his thoughts. "Did they get lazy making the game?" Ziyu asked. "I don't think so. If they hadn't bothered with the details, they wouldn't have buried this coffin here in the first place. Since they even designed the coffin, it wouldn't be difficult for them to place a skeleton or corpse inside, right? There must be a reason why it's like this," Gu-Fei analyzed. "Maybe Murphy isn't truly dead?" Ziyu suggested. "That." Gu-Fei agreed, "or someone stole the corpse." "Why steal it?" Ziyu asked. "I don't know. Maybe there's a secret inside the corpse," Gu-Fei answered tentatively. "So what do we do now?" Ziyu asked. "Now we wait," Gu-Fei answered. "Wait for what?" Ziyu questioned. "If unearthing this coffin is not part of the quest, it will revert back to its original buried state. But if it's actually part of the quest plot, it will return under the ground only after we complete the quest," Gu-Fei explained. Ziyu was dumbfounded after hearing this. Gu-Fei laughed. "When all is said and done, Parallel Worlds quests were made by the game design team. It's like we're interacting with these quest designers when we're doing a quest or intermingling with any NPCs as part of a quest. So when doing difficult quests like this, it's beneficial for us to try and understand their thought process." Ziyu displayed a look of distress for some time until she finally blurted out, "I don't even know what they're thinking about." Gu-Fei chuckled. "I don't as well. It's just a hunch." The two waited by Murphy's grave for a few minutes, and it did not revert back to its original state. Gu-Fei confirmed his guess. Murphy's identity was truly shrouded in mystery. Meanwhile, Yi Xiaoyu was feeling bored, So he decided to activate the monitoring room's tracker for Gufei to watch the latter's progress in the chain quest. As for the monitoring team members' accusation about the activity being against the rule, Yi Xiao had given them the excuse of Gufei being the first player to obtain a chain quest. So I need to observe him for a while. I need to check if there's any problem with the chain quest. Actually, Gufei was not the only player to have fortuitously obtained a chain quest. Yi Xiao chose to watch Gufei purely because he was interested in his gameplay. However, Gufei's quest progress had left him astounded. Completing a chain quest was not just about reaching its end in a straightforward manner. Many different routes existed in between the start and the finish. These numerous routes were of course created by the game designers to provide players a myriad of ways to attain quest completion, as well as to account for the players' different levels, job classes, and skills. Yi Xiao already had a deep understanding of Gufei's in-game character. So when he simulated the quest using Gufei's in-game character, Yi Xiao discovered that he would get stuck at certain portions of it whichever route he took. The jam was due to the in-game character's level or skill limitation, and neither could be solved by relying on wits alone. With all these in mind, Yi Xiao waited to see Gufei's expression as he got stumped on the quest. He almost burst out laughing when Gufei and Ziyu got on all fours and searched for clues on the ground by the church. However, this feeling of schadenfreude only lasted for a short while before it was replaced by surprise. The pair seemed to have actually found something, as they got up from the ground and rushed over to Chief Edwin's hut in the next moment. They even proceeded to dig up Murphy's grave afterward. Murphy was indeed a possible route, and picking up a trail by the church was another. However, Murphy could definitely not be triggered by searching the ground like what Gufei and Ziyu had just done. The method that Yi Xiao knew to trigger it was absolutely not doable for those two. And yet, it seemed as if they had managed to stumble upon the very same route. Yi Xiao really wanted to listen to the two's discussion, but the monitoring system had the audio turned off. After all, conversations between players might have private content. They would only be able to listen in on the players' talks by turning the audio on. However, neither Yi Xiao nor the monitoring team had permission to do so without the higher-ups' clearance. Yi Xiao and the pair by the graveyard were filled with doubts as they mulled over different things. Yi Xiao suddenly realized that a level 30 player should not even be able to trigger the chain quest's requirement of meeting Eddie in the first place. And yet, Gufei had done exactly that. Was there a way to progress in this chain quest that they had overlooked while designing it? In Parallel World, Gufei and Ziyu had left the graveyard and were now talking to Chief Edwin once more. The village chief showed surprise when they informed him of the missing corpse, yet he did not introduce a new conversation topic to them. It was getting dark when they left Chief Edwin's hut. With the 4-hour daytime over, nighttime was upon them in the blink of an eye. Gufei looked up at the moon in the night sky. Would there be a full moon tonight? If there was a full moon tonight, where would the werewolf appear? Gufei thought of the church and hurriedly ran toward it with Ziyu in tow. Moonlight finally descended. Sadly, there was not a full moon tonight. If the moon in Parallel World had phases, then tonight was definitely not a night of a full moon. Ziyu, can you see what shape the moon has? Gufei asked Ziyu. He suspected that the night sky he was seeing while on his quest would be different from what the other players were seeing. Do you have myopia? Ziyu raised her head as she asked, before replying, it's a crescent moon. It's the same, Gufei muttered to himself. Today was not a day when the werewolf would transform. The dilapidated church appeared very desolate under the night sky. It would serve as a great crime scene for a murder. Gufei sighed. At this moment, a shadowy figure suddenly scampered from outside the decrepit wall. Who's there? Gufei shouted instinctively as he pulled out the sacred flames of baptism, ready to strike. The shadowy figure had already rushed toward him, however. Werewolf! Ziyu exclaimed. Her voice did not quake when facing such a terrifying creature. Instead, she showed exhilaration. The werewolf appeared. The game design team would definitely cry if they saw this. They constructed such a terrifying scene, yet it got completely ignored by this lady. She's so ditzy she even forgot what fear is, Gufei thought to himself. He raised his Chinese broadsword and dashed toward the shadow, delivering a cut. It was indeed a werewolf. The werewolf's body structure was huge and bulky. Its pair of eyes glowed green as its front paws clawed toward Gufei. Spittle from the werewolf's jaws flew everywhere as the moonlight ominously reflected off its razor-sharp teeth. The werewolf dodged in midair Gufei's first slash, as its front paws continued to swipe at him with unbridled ferocity. Gufei was close enough to smell the monster's rancid breath. Gufei quickly held the Chinese broadsword firmly to his side, parrying the incoming swipe from the werewolf. With a whoosh, Gufei flew backward from the impact. "It's too fast!" Gufei exclaimed in his head. The werewolf's speed was definitely as fast as how he had imagined it would be. It was almost on par with the speed a warrior's cyclone could attain. This made Gufei use the same method he had employed when dealing with Ziu's cyclone back then. Luckily, his weapon did not break this time. The blade of his Chinese broadsword was facing outward, and the werewolf's attack was not made using a weapon but its paws. As a result, the werewolf was injured by the force behind its swipe. Isaac Newton's third law of motion: for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Gufei was thrown onto the ground, and his HP dropped a bit from the resulting impact. Had the swipe fully connected, Gufei would have surely been insta-killed there and then. Ziu stared intently at the werewolf, as she dashed forward with her axe raised to hack at it. "Don't!" Gufei hurriedly shouted. He and Ziu were originally standing together. The werewolf would have been capable of pouncing on the two of them had that been its original intention. It was only because Gufei was the quest holder that it had focused on attacking him. So although the werewolf ignored Ziu, that did not mean that it would continue to do so if she struck it. Unfortunately, Ziu could no longer stop her forward sprint at this point in time due to inertia. But before she could close in the distance, the werewolf had already emitted a low growl and leapt over a wall to escape. "Did I scare it away?" Ziu was dumbfounded. Gufei quickly chased after the werewolf over the wall, yet no traces of it could be seen. "It's injured." Gufei returned to Ziu's side and squatted as he touched the few drops of blood on the ground. "Did you see what's on its neck?" Gufei asked Ziu. Ziu shook her head. "Do werewolves even wear collars like dogs?" Gufei mumbled to himself. As the werewolf was running away, he had noticed an item hanging around its neck. Chapter 63, One Truth Prevails. "Did we mistake a regular wolfhound for the werewolf?" Ziu asked. "That's highly unlikely." Gufei believed that the chain quest's complex design was something that the developers were very proud, hence, they would never incorporate such a ludicrous concept to any of those quests. Instead of being a real werewolf, it was actually a wolfhound with sentience. That was just plain silly. "Let's see if it has left any other trails of blood," Gufei suggested. "Good idea. We can catch up to it by following the blood trail," Ziu exclaimed. "And it was scratched once on its claw. Wouldn't it be too far-fetched for it to bleed that much?" Gufei rationalized. "Who knows?" Ziu asked rhetorically, as she began to search around once more. As for Gufei, he stared intently at the few drops of blood on the ground. The werewolf was far stronger than what Gufei had anticipated. It was unusually fast and possessed high attack power. Gufei only managed to block its single attack even though he had tried his best. He had no chance of winning at all if he were to engage the werewolf in a real fight. Ultimately, it was inevitable for there to be a gap in terms of strength between the bosses and players. Even if Gufei wanted to, he had no way of bridging the gap between them with his skills alone. The werewolf would most likely be done with Gufei in just 2 or 3 strikes before he could even observe its attack patterns and grasp the loopholes within. Still, why would such a powerful boss flee? Was a mere scratch on its claw all it took to frighten the ferocious werewolf? This was far too ridiculous. Or was the sacred flames of baptism that fearsome after being plated with silver? Was the werewolf so stricken with terror once it noticed that the weapon had been coated with silver? Evidently, the escape of the werewolf was not something that it decided on its own. Rather, it was a scenario that the game designers had come up with beforehand. Gufei just happened to fulfill the condition that led to the werewolf's escape. The condition seemed to be entering the werewolf. Just what kind of message was such a scenario trying to convey? Gufei could not fathom it at the moment. "There's no other blood trail," Ziu said disappointedly after searching the nearby surroundings through and through. "Let's go to where the village chief is. I have some more things to ask," Gufei said. "Is that so?" "Let's go, let's go." It was quiet over in Yaguang village under the night sky. The NPCs that had earlier been roaming about were nowhere to be seen. Instead, there were now houses with lit windows. Whereas the players were active inside the game 24/7, the NPCs were bounded by their programmed daily schedule, being active at daytime and resting at nighttime. At times like this, telling who the humans and who the NPCs were was amusingly hard. When they knocked on Chief Edwin's door, he politely greeted them like how he always did. "Ah, chosen hero, you are here again." Chief Edwin kept on addressing Goofy as the chosen hero. "The werewolf that killed Murphy. What does it look like? Does it wear anything on its neck?" Goofy asked. "Oh, you'll have to ask Mr. Adrian about that. He's the guy who lives near the church, and the sole witness of that past incident. He heard sounds coming from the church that night, so he went over to investigate and witness the werewolf killing Murphy. That poor man, he must have been traumatized," Chief Edwin said. "Mr. Adrian." Goofy recalled him as the wealthiest man in Yaguang village. "Chief, where's Murphy house?" Goofy asked again. "It's the third house by the woods. No one has gone there ever since he died," Chief Edwin answered. "Let's go there for a look," Goofy said to Ziu. Murphy's house was actually very easy to find, as it was the only one with no lit windows among the houses. No one lived there ever since Murphy passed away. As they drew closer to Murphy's house, Goofy gently blocked Ziu, who was behind him, and signaled her to keep quiet. He then carefully walked toward the house as he held sacred flames of baptism in front of him. Ziu felt so nervous that she dared not exhale, although she was clueless as to what Goofy was doing. She only saw Goofy walking up to the door, sticking his ear on it as he listened for quite a while, and pushing the door open. Ziu inspected her surroundings nervously before sneakily going inside along with Goofy. Goofy had already lit up an oil lamp inside the house and stood near a bed, looking at a parchment in his hand. "What is it?" Ziu got close to him. "Seems like a map to me," Goofy answered. "Treasure map?" Ziu felt thrilled. "Too bad there are no coordinates on it. It might be a little tricky to locate it." Goofy said. "Let me see it." Ziu took it. "This right here is the main street of the village, and over here looks to be the church." Ziu pointed at the parchment with her quill and started to mumble. "I know where it is," Ziu declared happily after a while. But when she turned around, she saw that Goofy was standing by the door and peeking outside warily. "What are you looking at?" Ziu inched closer to him. "Shh." Goofy gestured her to keep her voice down. Even though NPCs were currently outside, Goofy was not sure if making too much noise would be one of the conditions to cancel their current actions. "Come on, let's trail after them," Goofy pulled Ziu. "I found the treasure spot." Ziu waved the parchment wildly. "Really nice, we'll go treasure hunting later. For now let's trail these four fellows," Goofy said. "Why? Are they up to something?" Ziu asked. "Not sure, but I recognize the three among the four as the NPCs that kept on avoiding me. I have never seen the fourth guy before." "They are definitely up to something," Goofy said. "Let's go, let's go," Ziu excitedly said. The four people walked silently on the main street of Yaguang village. Resting on their shoulders were something that seemed like shovels. "Uh-oh, don't tell me they're going to dig treasures." "Could they be planning to dig the treasure shown on this map?" Ziu said. "Didn't you already figure out the treasure spot of that parchment? See if the path they are taking now leads to that treasure or not," Goofy said. "It's not the right way," Ziu replied. "Then, let's keep on trailing them." The four NPCs eventually reached a little hill near the village. They disappeared somewhere in the middle of it after pushing away a layer of plants blocking their way. "Look, what's that?" Ziu pointed at something. "That's a shaft," Goofy answered. "What are they doing inside?" Ziu asked. "How am I supposed to know?" Goofy replied. "Shall we take a look?" Ziu suggested. "Don't be so hasty. Let's wait until morning before going in." "They'll surely leave in the morning," Goofy said. "How do you know that?" Ziu asked. "These NPCs need to be in their position inside the village during the day," Goofy answered. Ziu looked at the time. "There's still more than an hour left." "Then, let's go through the spot that you figured out earlier," Goofy said. "Where is it?" "The woods behind Murphy's house." The two returned to Murphy's house and entered the woods behind it. Ziu led the way with the parchment in her hand, looking around and finally stopping under a tree. "It's here," Ziu pointed. This iron shovel is well worth the money, Gufei mumbled as he took the iron shovel out and began digging. Treasure chest, treasure chest, treasure chest. Ziu chanted as she saw the pit got dug deeper and deeper. However, what appeared in the end was not a treasure chest but a burlap sack. So heavy. Gufei grabbed the sack with his two hands, yet he was still unable to pull it out from the pit he had dug. Allow me, Ziu came forward. The burlap sack was pulled out from the pit as she lightly grabbed onto it. Once again, Gufei felt oppressed at the sight. The two were stunned as they opened the burlap sack and looked inside. Gold? They looked at each other. Ziu took out the small bag of gold ore from her own quest. She compared a piece of gold from her bag with the one inside the burlap sack. They look so much alike. Ziu remarked. Mr. Adrian, huh? Gufei was deep in thought. Let's return this gold to him. There must be a reward. Ziu felt delighted. Did you receive a quest related to this sack of gold? Gufei asked. No. Then, why would there be a reward when there's no quest? Gufei stated matter-of-factly. What are these gold ore for, then? I'm thinking that it might be an important aspect of my chain quest. Gufei was feeling vexed. Things just go on and on. I am tired, let's take a break. Where to? Ziu asked. The village inn should still be open for business. Let's head there to rest and wait until morning, Gufei said. The two headed to the inn. It was a game after all, so there was no such thing as closing time for the system-operated shops. Order any drinks you want. It's my treat, Gufei said. I feel sleepy all of a sudden. I'm taking a nap. Ziu lay down on the table as soon as she finished speaking. Gufei randomly ordered a glass of drink. While drinking on, he pondered about his chain quest. Two groups of village NPCs treated him differently. Traces of a fight in front of the church, Murphy's strong yet unknown fighting capabilities, the missing corpse of Murphy, the werewolf that fled from just a light injury, Murphy's hidden sack of gold, and finally, the NPC villagers that went to a shaft late at night. There must be a story timeline that could explain all these events clearly, which would display the chronological order of the entire storyline behind the Eddie's mission quest. Gufei doubted that everything could be solved by simply finding the werewolf and killing it. Currently, Gufei had an idea of what he was supposed to do. He just needed to wait until morning. The whole thing would be revealed once he made sure of a few crucial things. Meanwhile, Yixiao, who had been observing Gufei as if he was watching a movie, was utterly blown away by how Gufei carried out his quest. From what Yixiao observed, Gufei was roaming about in front of the church when he suddenly ran off to unearth Murphy's grave. Yixiao still did not know whether Gufei had figured something out or simply taken a wild guess. He actually managed to fend off the werewolf's assault. He's only at level 30. A mere slap from that werewolf can kill a level 30 player. If the situation continued to unfold at the current pace, Gufei might be able to achieve a completion rating of 90% or above for his chain quest. Completion rating. This was how the game measured how well a player did for a chain quest. This same criterion was used to determine the value of the final reward for players as well. Killing the werewolf? That was only one of the many ways to complete the chain quest. For example, if Yixiao was the one doing the quest, he could complete it simply by going to where the werewolf was and killing it with a single blow. This was because he knew the whereabouts of the werewolf. However, he would get the lowest completion rating and the worst kind of reward. The way to get the highest completion rating was to unravel the entire storyline behind the chain quest and leave no stone unturned, presenting everything clearly. This was akin to a standalone game with multiple endings. Every ending could be considered clearing the game and beating it, but only one true ending would be considered as the perfect ending. As the great kid detective Conan once said, one truth prevails. Chapter 64, Werewolf or Wolfman? Gufei drank liquor all by himself. The sight of Ziu sleeping deeply close by induced drowsiness in him. Eating and drinking in parallel world was truly just a sensory experience. The player's real bodies would not be affected by consuming anything in-game at all. Although sleeping in-game slightly eased the tiredness of a player's body, sleeping in reality was the only way for a person to recover fully from fatigue. Therefore, sleeping in-game when players were feeling tired was ill-advised, as going offline and simply getting into a real bed would be much better. Looking around, Gufei discovered that the inn was empty. Yaguang village not only was far from Yai city but also lacked any ideal grinding maps nearby. These factors explained why hardly any players could be seen resting in the inn. Gufei and Ziyu had made several rounds in the inn and all they saw coming and going were NPCs and more NPCs. Sleeping in the game was not a solution, but staying awake was not good either. Out of boredom, Gufei stood up and began practicing his blade work in a corner of the inn. He got out his magic staff and practiced his techniques for it. He ended his practice session with a set of hand-to-hand combat moves upon seeing that the sky had finally brightened. Wake up! Wake up! Gufei nudged Ziyu. Is it already morning? Ziyu still looked somewhat sleepy. Yup, Gufei answered. Let me just lay down for 5 more minutes. Ziyu collapsed back onto the table again. Quest. Gufei reminded. Let's go, let's go. Time waits for no man. Ziyu immediately perked up. She got up from the table and said to Gufei, look lively. The two left the inn and headed to the hillside where they had ended their tailing last night. Since they had noted the coordinates before, the two managed to locate the shaft easily despite everywhere around them looking identical. Seeing that there was no one around, Gufei pushed off the large mound of vegetation that hid the shaft's entrance. The shaft's pathway was not as large or as complex as Oolong Cave. In just a few steps, they found themselves in the deepest part of it in what looked like a big room. Gufei picked up the bits of loose rocks on the ground and touched the walls. This medium-sized shaft was actually a gold mine. The gold ore that Mr. Adrian had given Ziyu and the sack of gold ore that they had found behind Murphy's house seemed to have originated from this place. This mine shaft and the sack of gold ore at Murphy's place. Were they all related to Mr. Adrian? Gufei had not forgotten that Ziyu's gold ore quest involving Mr. Adrian was unrelated to his chain quest. Gufei and Ziyu being together, as well as Ziyu obtaining the quest that had led to Gufei's discovery of Mr. Adrian's secret gold mine, was purely coincidental. If all these serendipitous events had not occurred, Gufei would never have connected Mr. Adrian to the gold mine here. What's this? As Gufei was pondering about those events, Ziyu found an urn in a corner of the shaft. By the time Gufei walked over, Ziyu had already unsealed the urn. She grabbed the handful of the grayish powder within and showed it up to Gufei. Gufei narrowed his eyes. These are bone ashes. Bone ashes? Ziyu felt shocked. The cremated remains of a person or animal, Gufei said as he mentally prepared himself for Ziyu's inevitable scream as she threw the urn away. But Ziyu remained unaffected, merely asking, whose is it? Only one person is dead in this village, Gufei hinted. So this is Murphy's? Ziyu asked. Gufei nodded his head. Someone dug out Murphy's corpse and burned it into ashes. Why would anyone do that? Ziyu asked. Maybe Murphy is a werewolf, Gufei surmised. So Murphy did not get murdered, he actually committed suicide. Ziyu concluded. Gufei laughed as he shook his head. Various questions could be answered if Murphy was truly a werewolf. This would explain how he was able to trade blows with another werewolf, and why the villagers do not know about his fighting capabilities. This would also explain why his buried remains were dug out to be cremated. What does that mean? According to Western folklores, a lycanthrope corpse can transform into a zombie vampire. Someone must have cremated his remains to prevent that from happening, Gufei explained. So who cremated him? Ziyu asked. His kin. Only a lycanthrope kin would know of Murphy's real identity and would worry about his corpse transforming, Gufei answered. Could that kin be the same werewolf that had killed Murphy? Ziyu wondered. Perhaps. But finding his cremated remains here proves something, Gufei stated. What? All those who come to this mine to extract gold ore are werewolves. I suspect that the villagers that have been avoiding me are actually werewolves, Gufei deduced. See? I told you. Ziyu said smugly. Gufei showed her a forced smile. You're really smart. Ziyu felt overjoyed. Told you I'm a quest expert. No kidding. So what's our next move? Ziyu asked. This bunch of werewolves is living among humans and seems to have no intentions of hurting them. Their goal here seems to be this gold mine. This shaft isn't large, so it can probably fit in 4 people at once when they're mining. I assume that 4 of them come here to mine gold ore every night. Murphy must have harbored ill intention that prompted him to secretly stash away some gold ore for himself. The others probably killed him upon discovering what he had been doing. I think that's the gist of things, Gu Fei explained. Werewolves are truly greedy creatures. Ziyu commented. With so many werewolves, I don't think this quest wants me to kill all of them off. There must be another way to resolve this, Gu Fei said as he pondered about it. Like what? Ziyu queried. I'm not sure yet. We'll decide our next step after identifying the werewolf that assaulted us yesterday, Gu Fei answered. You know who it is? Gu Fei laughed. I managed to cut its right hand back then. Since my silver-coated Chinese broadsword has the additional trait of nullifying regeneration, that werewolf's wound won't recover so soon. This must be a method that the system gave me to locate the werewolf. So anyone whose right hand bears an injury is the werewolf? Ziyu asked. That's right. Then, let's go. After covering the shaft's entrance, the duo headed back to the village. The NPCs in the village were all at their designated positions. Gu Fei hesitated. He did not know how the NPCs would react if he suddenly grabbed their right hands one by one to check for a wound. After a moment of contemplation, Gu Fei decided to be sneaky about conducting his inspection instead. Fortunately, Parallel Worlds NPCs had a habit of gesturing with their hands while talking. As Ziyu engaged these NPCs in a conversation, Gu Fei used that opportunity to observe their hands from the sidelines. In the end, the villagers that had been avoiding Gu Fei, whom he suspected to be werewolves, did not sport a single wound on their right hands. How can this be? Gu Fei was dumbfounded. Did we miss anyone? Ziyu asked. Gu Fei had asked Chief Edwin for the total population of Yaguang village. By his current estimation, they had not missed anyone. Each of these NPCs was out in broad daylight. Let's go look over everyone, then. Ziyu suggested. Looks like that's the only way. Gu Fei listlessly accepted Ziyu's dumb recommendation. The last bunch of villagers responded to Gu Fei. But after going through these NPCs, not one of them had a wounded hand. Why is that werewolf so hard to find? Ziyu asked in frustration. Now, only one person is left. Gu Fei stated. Who? Mr. Adrian, Gu Fei replied. Everyone in the village was bustling about the place, except for Mr. Adrian, who had not left his mansion by the church. Oh, yeah. Ziyu nodded. He has gold ore as well. Anyone who has that is a werewolf. That might not be the case. He's the wealthiest man in the village. He might just have bought the gold ore from the werewolves. Let's go find him before we speak more of this. As soon as the two arrived at Mr. Adrian's mansion, Ziyu, who had gotten used to them visiting people's houses, immediately knocked on the door. However, no one answered. Is that NPC not at home as well? Gu Fei felt annoyed. Maybe he's in the cellar in the backyard, Ziyu said. When they arrived in the backyard, they saw that the cellar doors were locked tightly. Mr. Adrian could not possibly be inside. Just as they were about to return to the front door, Gu Fei and Ziyu coincidentally saw Mr. Adrian returning home from being out. Gu Fei hurriedly called his name. Oh, chosen hero, the wealthiest person in the village sure was different, treating Gu Fei with utmost respect unlike the other villagers. I heard you saw the werewolf that killed Murphy, Gu Fei began. Mr. Adrian's expression immediately showed fear. That was truly a terrifying night. Saying so, he started describing the spine-chilling appearance of the werewolf. Was Murphy dead by then? Gu Fei asked. Yes, that poor lad, Mr. Adrian sighed. Did you see how the werewolf killed him? Gu Fei pressed on. No. He was already dead by the time I arrived. The werewolf left very quickly, too, Mr. Adrian answered. Gu Fei thanked him, which Mr. Adrian very happily accepted. He stepped aside to let Gu Fei and Ziyu be on their way. His right hand doesn't seem to be injured, Ziyu said. No, Gu Fei nodded. He was feeling downcast, having not expected this method to fail. Nevertheless, he had gleaned some new information after exchanging words with Mr. Adrian. Murphy would have to transform into a werewolf for him to fight with another werewolf. Therefore, he should still be in his lycanthrope form when he died. Instead, Mr. Adrian and the villagers who hurried over saw a human corpse. No one could cause a werewolf to change his form besides the werewolf himself. Meaning, Murphy had known that he could not defeat the other werewolf, so he used his remaining strength to turn back into a human being instead. He would rather die than let the villagers find out his identity as a lycanthrope. What was the meaning of this? Was it out of kindness? Was he abandoning his inner darkness? Or was he a wolf with a man's heart? Did that mean he was actually not a werewolf but a wolfman instead? This is so frustrating. Gufei bellowed toward the sky. This chain quest had left him mentally exhausted. Just when Gufei thought he had made a breakthrough discovery, he realized that he was not on the right route at all. He looked ahead and saw a lone NPC right before him. It was the same NPC that had sneakily mined gold ore last night. God damn it. What's the point of beating around the bush with a bunch of A.I.'S? Created by the system. Questing is all about triggering the right condition through repeated attempts, right? At most, I will just die. What's the big deal about that? With such a thought, Gufei stepped forward boldly and pointed at the guy in front of him. Hey, you. The NPC immediately looked as if he wanted to flee. I saw you digging gold ore. Gufei went straight to the point. The NPC's expression immediately changed and he suddenly turned around to escape. Stop! Gufei hollered as he happily gave chase. See, sometimes, it's very easy to trigger the next event. Chapter 65, The Legend of the Lycanthrope. The NPC actually ran very fast. Even with Gufei's full agility physique, he had to exert quite the effort to chase after the person. All he could do was ensure that his target would not leave his line of sight. Meanwhile, the heavily encumbered and slow Xiu had long been abandoned far behind in this high-speed foot chase. The places the NPC could flee were actually limited. In fact, he only circled the village a few times before finally barging into a house. Gufei firmly fixed his eyes on the NPC as he unhesitatingly strode forward and banged his fist on the house's door. Gufei had long steeled his resolve to confront the werewolves despite knowing that there was a possibility of him dying. Actually, he was anticipating how the werewolves would react toward his provocative actions. Would they transform and combine their strength to beat him up? Gufei could only accept the outcome if that really happened, as an entire guild was probably needed to accomplish this chain quest. The door finally opened after a bout of knocking, yet the person that appeared before Gufei was not the one whom he had been chasing. The stout man standing in front of Gufei was at least a foot taller than him. He almost bit his tongue. A werewolf would become bigger whenever it transformed. Given how well built this man looked, he would probably be as big as an elephant when he transformed. Gufei had encountered him before. Seeing as the person Gufei was chasing had actually sought refuge in this man's house, could he perhaps be the werewolves' leader? I want to know everything about the gold mine. Gufei immediately broached the subject. The man remained mum but did not chase Gufei away. I already know you're all werewolves. Gufei threw caution to the wind and laid his cards on the table. Surprisingly, the man did not attempt to silence Gufei by killing him. Instead, he just showed unease at Gufei's revelation. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone about it. Gufei clarified his stand on the matter to the werewolf. He recalled that quests like this would need additional items beyond just a silver tongue. Merely appealing to the AI's feelings was futile even though this was a full immersion game. With that in mind, Gufei took out the urn containing Murphy's ashes and presented it to the man. I found this inside the mine shaft. Since Murphy's grave is empty, I suppose you all dug him out and cremated his remains? Gufei asked for confirmation of his guess. Gufei could see sorrow reflected in the man's eyes. The NPC's change in emotion was etched clearly on his face for Gufei to see. He took the werewolf's emotional state into account as he thought of his follow-up question. The NPC had initially shown anxiety and uncertainty upon hearing that their identity as werewolves was exposed. He then became morose when Gufei mentioned Murphy's death. Murphy would rather die than reveal his identity as a lycanthrope, and the rest of the villagers were still in the dark about this. Gufei finally understood this whole business. This group of werewolves was afraid that the villagers would uncover their identity. Murphy had chosen to return into his human form before dying to prevent the villagers from panicking among themselves, which would create trouble for his fellow werewolves. After all, Murphy was a villager as well. Murphy being a werewolf would surely make the villagers suspicious of the people around them. If the werewolves were to live under such scrutiny, they would sooner or later be exposed to the villagers. Gufei felt ashamed of himself for jumping into conclusion that these werewolves had murdered Murphy over a gold or distribution dispute. But then, who was the werewolf that killed Murphy? More importantly, why was this stout man before him not talking at all? Could he be a pure-blood lycanthrope that had yet to master the human language? You all don't want the villagers to know your real identity, right? Gufei asked once more. The stout man continued to stare at Gufei. Why? Gufei displayed Ziu's stubbornness and continued to question the man until he finally got an answer. "We don't want to kill or be killed," the stout man finally spoke. Gufei sighed in relief and asked, "What do you mean?" "If the villagers were to find out we are werewolves, they would definitely try to eliminate us," the burly man explained. "We have been living among them for so many years and never thought of harming them. We only hunt beasts deep into the woods during a full moon to honor our bestial bloodline." "So why do you all wish to live with humans?" Gufei asked. "We are the ones who lived here first. In the past, we learned human mannerisms while living in the forest. Eventually, we decided to leave the forest and build this village. It was only later that the humans trickled in and decided to live with us. And after so many years, the village turned into what it is today," the man explained further. "What about the werewolf that killed Murphy, then?" Gufei asked. "He's not one of us." The man gritted his teeth. "I don't know where he came from, but he possesses tremendous strength. I think he's someone from the village because he knows us very well. But we can't seem to catch his scent." "Why did he kill Murphy?" Gufei asked. That stout man remained silent again. "Ah, you guys ran so fast." Ziu's voice could be heard from behind Gufei, finally managing to catch up after so long. Gufei suddenly thought of something and signaled Ziu to take out the sack of gold ore that he had dug out from the forest near Murphy's backyard. "I found a map in Murphy's house and dug this out." Gufei once again presented an item. "What's with the gold mine?" Gufei pressed on. That stout man said, "One full moon, we went deep into the forest to hunt animals. An unknown werewolf suddenly appeared and demanded us to follow his orders. Murphy challenged him into a fight but was defeated. From then on, he demands us to take turns helping him extract gold ore every night. You have the strength in numbers, why are you afraid of one werewolf? Gang up on him." Gufei blurted out. "We only attack in a pack when we are hunting animals. Duels are reserved for battles between two fellow werewolves. Our law dictates that we follow the strongest," the man stated. "Was that how Murphy died?" Gufei asked. "No. We all deemed that the foreign werewolf with dubious background was too strong for us, so Murphy worked hard to uncover his human identity in order to use that as a leverage. Unfortunately, he was discovered and killed during his search." The man sighed with regret. "Don't you all wish to avenge Murphy?" Gufei questioned. "We don't know his human identity, and we couldn't best him in combat either," the man replied. Gufei thought for a while and asked, "If werewolves are injured by a silver weapon, what will happen?" "In that case, the wound will require quite a few days to heal," the man answered. "Is one night sufficient to heal completely?" "No." "Is there any medicine or spell that can overcome this?" Gufei pressed on. "There's none. Werewolves like us possess high regenerative abilities. We can recover very quickly provided that it is not a silver weapon that injures us," the man revealed. Gufei had already expected this answer, so he nodded his head. "Let us help you defeat this foreign werewolf. It is too shameful to depend on humans for this." The man refused his offer. Gufei had not expected the werewolves to have this level of pride. Gufei helplessly commented, "Maybe he's a human, too?" "Human? We saw with our eyes that he is a werewolf. He even has our species scent. It is only because his scent is masked very well when he takes his human form that we are unable to locate him," the man said. "Is he wearing something on his neck?" Gufei asked. "It appears to be so." "That's him. Yesterday, I cut him with a silver weapon, yet I could not find a single villager with a wound today." "If he is not a human being, how did he recover so soon?" Gufei insisted. "Don't worry. Just leave this matter to us. We promise not to tell others about your identity." Saying their farewell to the stout man, Gufei and Ziu were once again on the road. "What have you found out?" Ziu asked. When she had arrived, Gufei and that man were already halfway into their conversation. Gufei tried to give her a quick summary, yet Ziu immediately forgot the first half while listening to the other half of the story. She only raised one question when he ended his spiel. "Humans can heal their wounds overnight? We humans don't possess fast healing ability, but we definitely do so in game through the help of healing spells. Think of the NPC priests by the entrance of the Priest Academy," Gufei reminded Ziu. "Over by the entrance of the Priest Academy in Yunjuan City, injured players could receive the NPC priests healing and administering to recover. If these priests could heal players, they would naturally be capable of healing fellow NPCs as well. Since werewolves were creatures with an affinity to darkness, they would obviously not be able to receive healing from the holy spells the priests used. So how can a human being transform into a werewolf? Ziu asked, puzzled. I'm still not sure, although I already know who he is, Gufei said in a dragging tone. Who? Ziu asked excitedly. Who owns a gold mine? Gufei smiled. Mr. Adrian. Ziu answered. That's right. Gufei nodded. Ah, if you kill Mr. Adrian, won't my quest become incomplete? Ziu was worried. Of course, not. Gufei said, even if Adrian is dead when I finish my quest, he'll just respawn accordingly. He'll still be the same Adrian, the wealthiest person in Yaguang village. You can even return to retrieve more gold ore from him in the future. That's fine, then. Ziu was appeased. It's all thanks to you, Gufei complimented. Why? If I didn't know about your quest, I wouldn't find out that Adrian and the gold mine are linked. How else would I learn that he's that werewolf? Gufei laughed. I told you I'm a quest expert. Ziu felt 10 feet tall. The very best. Gufei praised generously. Does that mean you're about to complete your chain quest? Ziu asked. Pretty soon, it seems. He could see the outline of Adrian's mansion far ahead on this path. Gufei took out sacred flames of baptism. The only question I have at this point is how to defeat him. Chapter 66, Fang of the Wolf King. Despite Gufei questioning himself on how to go about defeating Adrian, the reason he dared to confront the latter in the first place was because he was confident that he would succeed. Only two things could allow a human being to turn into a lycanthrope: a spell or equipment. Since Adrian continued to wear a weird necklace even when he transformed into a werewolf, Gufei was sure that the item was the one that allowed the latter to do so. Gufei did not recall seeing any item around Adrian's neck when he had met him earlier today, however. This meant that the necklace was not wearable all the time. Instead, it could only be equipped during crucial moments. This must be because putting the necklace on would immediately transform the wearer into a werewolf. Hence, as long as Gufei could prevent Adrian from equipping the necklace, the latter would stay as a regular human being that he could easily defeat. Gufei went over the plan in his mind one more time and felt that it was foolproof. Currently, Adrian's mansion loomed before him. Gufei raised his arm, inhaled deeply, and knocked on the door. When Adrian opened the door, Gufei quickly spied his neck. It was unadorned. Ah, chosen hero, welcome. Adrian's tone of voice had not changed. Gufei took out the sack of gold ore he had found in Murphy's property. I know everything. These are the gold ore Murphy hid. I believe he was trying to use these as bait to lure you out. You must have been searching for these for a long time. This was not a meaningless gesture. NPCs belonged to a unique category that the players could interact with whenever they wanted. But if the system deemed this interaction as a form of attack that would reduce the NPC's health, it would immediately make the NPCs immune to the assault, meaning, the NPCs would no longer be assailable. This was similar to how the safe zones functioned for players. Therefore, Gufei must trigger the conditions that would allow him to engage the NPC Adrian in a combat. Adrian's expression changed after the sack of gold ore was tossed in front of him. The werewolves already told me everything about this matter. I know you're the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. You know their identity, including their unwillingness to harm humans. You use their weaknesses to threaten them into doing your bidding. How utterly despicable. I feel so foolish. Gufei thought as he mimed, gagging inside his head. I'm actually talking about mortals with an AI. Surrender yourself. Gufei's sacred flames of baptism flashed out. Adrian abruptly turned around to flee, but Gufei had been prepared for it. Gufei did not plan to give Adrian any breathing space, as mere seconds were all the latter needed to equip that necklace. Adrian proved himself to be an agile individual, managing to dodge Gufei's slash. However, this adroitness was nothing compared to a werewolf's. At most, it was comparable to mountain bandit leader Sato's speed. Ziu, block the back door. Gufei shouted. Got it. While Adrian was still receiving Gufei in the foyer of the mansion, Ziu had already positioned herself in the back door under Gufei's instruction. Only in this cramped space could Gufei pressure Adrian with his every strike, preventing the latter from having any chance to put the necklace on. Actually, Gufei had practiced these same attack patterns in the inn a few hours ago. Coincidentally, The size of the inn was about the same size as Adrian's mansion. Waves of heat from sacred flames of baptism rippled everywhere in the foyer as Gufei executed his blade work. The silver blade harmoniously interlaced with luminous flashes of red. All Adrian could do was to keep dodging this exquisite barrage of slashes, becoming more and more suppressed as time went by. Fuck this. Yi Xiaoyu, who had been raptly monitoring Gufei's progress from far away, could not help but exclaim when he saw Gufei making it to the final obstacle. He had indeed designed a necklace that would allow Mr. Adrian to transform himself into a werewolf. He just never expected Gufei to discover this loophole and exploit it. If Yi Xiaoyu was not seeing the scene right now, he would not believe it possible for someone to suppress Mr. Adrian to the point of him not being able to equip the necklace. Although each chain quest utilized the storyline's degree of completion as a gauge, it would usually accumulate to a poignant challenging battle at a critical juncture. After all, combat was the main focus in MMOs. In Gufei's chain quest, this fight with the werewolf Mr. Adrian should be akin to a face-off with the game's last boss. Defeating it through a player's superior strength was naturally the most straightforward method. Other methods existed as well to allow the completion of this quest stage, such as destroying Mr. Adrian's necklace or dragging the fight until the effect of the transformation ended. Preventing Mr. Adrian from equipping the necklace from the start was not included in these methods, however. And yet, Gufei had managed to do just that. By doing so, the strength of the last boss, also known as a chain quest's completion gatekeeper, had drastically decreased. The current Mr. Adrian's combat ability was akin to a downgraded version of the mountain bandit leader Sato. The two's speed was the same, yet Mr. Adrian possessed lower attack power and defense. Wait, hold it. Adrian loudly pleaded. Although his body was littered with wounds, he was still a boss and could not easily be felled like the average monster by Gufei. Owing to this fact, he remained quite lively even after taking some of Gufei's attacks. Gufei did not stop his assault, however. What if this was a ploy Adrian had cooked up to stop Gufei's attacks and give himself room to wear the necklace? Do you know what you're doing? You're helping a foreign race while killing your own. Adrian incessantly hollered as he tried to escape from Gufei. They're werewolves. Cruelty and murder run in their blood. Gufei felt annoyed at how this AI had come around to lecture him on the issues of morality. Let me go and I'll give you half of my fortune inside the cellar, Adrian begged. Adrian only received a flash of red as his answer. All of it, Mr. Adrian desperately added. Another flash of red came his way. Gufei mercilessly attacked Adrian until the latter finally collapsed into a heap on the ground, yelling until he breathed his last, "You idiot!" Gufei raised his hand and slashed for one final time. Everything abruptly became quiet. Yi Xiaoyu stared dumbly at the screen before him. Even the NPC villain's final plea failed to work on Gufei. Mr. Adrian had received coding to verbally persuade his assailant to stop his or her attacks once the NPC's health fell to 1/5 of the original. If the player considered this offer as a possible reward for the chain quest and let his or her guard down, Mr. Adrian would use the time it took the player to retrieve the fortune from the cellar to escape. This escape would be systematically carried out and the player could do nothing to prevent this. Mr. Adrian would definitely disappear somewhere within the game. Letting the perpetrator escape during this fight sequence meant that the completion rate would be curbed at 80%, despite the chain quest being tagged as completed at that point. This guy, Yi Xiaoyu mumbled. The monitoring system's lack of sound prevented Yi Xiaoyu from hearing Gufei's final words after he had cut down Mr. Adrian. "You're the real idiot. Killing you means that all your fortune belongs to me now, right?" "Quest complete," Xiu cheerfully exclaimed after Adrian was defeated. Gufei pulled out his quest log to check. The quest was still listed as ongoing, so there must still be some work left. In fact, Gufei had yet to receive an experience point even now. As he looted Adrian's corpse, he indeed found a necklace among his valuables. Fang of the Wolf King turns wearer into a werewolf lord for 15 minutes. Cooldown period, 60 minutes. Gufei happily put it on, wanting to give it a try. Instead, he received a system prompt. Quest item, unusable for players. This was a rare sight in Parallel World. Even if mages could not move when wearing the warrior job class heavy armor, they could still put it on. Gufei had never experienced being restricted from wearing an accessory around his neck. Xiu wanted to have a look as well, Yet an unknown force prevented Gufei from handing it over to her. "It says it's a quest item," Gufei explained helplessly. "Oh. Let's keep looting." Gufei bent over and continued searching Adrian's corpse. "Let's search for the key to the cellar. There are a lot of gold ore in there." A key indeed hung by Adrian's waist. The two quickly rushed to the backyard with it, unlocking the cellar double doors and climbing down. Although heaps of treasures could be found within, they were identical to the gold ore in Murphy's sack. The duo did not know if they could exchange gold ore for in-game currency. Gufei and Ziu looked at each other. "What now?" Ziu asked. "Can we exchange these for gold coins?" Gufei asked. "I don't think so." The gold ore Ziu received were meant to be exchanged for a quest reward, and she was unsure if that would be in gold coins or something else. They had a cellar full of gold ore, yet they had no way of turning them into usable in-game currency. It was truly a painful realization. They could not carry all the gold ore back as well even if they wanted to. Gold ore were extremely heavy. Ziu's burlap sack was carried by her, and Gufei's weak in-game physique could only sustain carrying the gold ore for 3 steps. "Forget it." Gufei sighed bitterly. Ziu began to repeat this mantra. "There's no gold here, only trash. There's no gold here, only trash." The two had no choice but to leave the cellar empty-handed. Gufei brought the fang of the Wolf King to the village chief as he explained the situation. It was all Adrian's doing. He used the string-kick to transform himself into a werewolf, threatening the villagers into drudgery. He even killed Murphy. Gufei kept his word and did not mention the fact that half of the villagers in Yaguang village were werewolves. "He's truly a scoundrel," the village chief agreed. "It's all thanks to you, chosen hero. You have resolved our village's greatest crisis, and to show our gratitude." Chief Edwin swiftly went inside the house and searched through a cabinet's drawer. Gufei felt excited. His efforts were not in vain now that he was about to receive his reward. "Take these clothes." The village chief emerged after a while and handed Gufei a robe. A mage robe to be precise. Gufei was extremely disappointed. He was only wearing his mage robe to disguise his identity. Gufei honestly felt that he had wasted his time on completing such a difficult quest upon being solemnly issued a mage robe. Gufei truly hated the mage job class now, as his reward was probably influenced by it. If Gufei were a thief, he would probably get a thief cloak. "Take it," Chief Edwin said once more. Ziu became anxious. "Hurry up and take it." "Just what are you dawdling for?" Gufei glumly took the item, casually examining it. Midnight Spirit Robe. Its defense was average, which was a common aspect of mage robes. Besides that, it increased intelligence by 20, spell mastery by 1, and spell damage by 10%. "What's spell mastery?" Gufei asked, as he handed it to Ziu who wanted to have a look. Ziu shook her head, clueless. It was clearly a great mage robe as it boosted intelligence and something called spell mastery. But in Gufei's case, he could only sigh at the sight of it. Nevertheless, it was much better than the beginner mage robe that he was currently wearing. Just the defense alone is an upgrade. It's gold tier equipment after all. Gufei thought of this as he took off his beginner mage robe and put Midnight Spirit Robe on. It was a pitch black robe, which truly embodied the darkness. "You look really evil," Ziu critiqued. As Gufei was feeling annoyed, he suddenly realized that Chief Edwin had not taken the Fang of the Wolf King necklace despite awarding him this mage robe. In addition, Gufei saw that it was still classified as a quest item. "Oh, will I receive another reward if I take it to the werewolves and let them have a look?" Gufei could feel hope reigniting within him once more. Chapter 67, The Final Reward. Gufei brought the Fang of the Wolf King with him as he paid the stout werewolf another visit. "I've gotten rid of him," Gufei straightforwardly said as he handed over the quest item. "He made a fool out of everyone by using this to transform himself into a lycanthrope." After taking a good look at the item, the stout werewolf expressed his shock. "He's a werewolf lord. No wonder he's so strong. He's alright, I guess." Gufei could only say so as he did not actually have the chance to witness how strong the werewolf lord was. Ironically, he had in fact had the chance to do so last night. The werewolf lord, unfortunately, fled with his tail between his legs once he had received a slight injury. "You did us a favor. We are also eternally grateful that you have kept your promise to not expose our identity to others," the stout werewolf sincerely said, adding, "To prevent the occurrence of a similar dilemma, can you leave the Fang of the Wolf King in our hands?" "Sure," Gufei immediately acquiesced. To express our gratitude. The stout werewolf went inside his room and rummaged through the bottom of his bed. Gufei could feel his heart sinking. The reward from Chief Edwin was at least properly stored inside a drawer. How great could this reward be if it was tossed haphazardly by the stout werewolf under his bed? But Gufei's eyes lit up when the stout werewolf emerged and faced Gufei once more. The stout werewolf was holding a sword. The blade had an expensive wine's purplish shine to it, while its surface was shrouded in a layer of black luster. The weapon exhibited the qualities of a top-grade weapon from its naked appearance alone. The stout werewolf handed it over, and Gufei eagerly accepted it. Moonlit night falls. The weapon's traits gave Gufei quite a shock. Not only did the sword possess a very high physical attack, it also had a fair share of magic attack, which was superior than the magic attack of the stave July had gifted him. The magic stave's main offense was naturally their magic attack. However, the term physical attack would be listed on the magic stave's traits window as well. This was because magic staves could technically function as physical weapons. As for weapons like sword, dagger, or saber, they would usually not have the word magic attack displayed on their traits window. Compared to all those weapons, the current sword in Gufei's hands not only had high magic attack listed on its traits window, the physical attack was very substantial as well. Two more traits could be seen further down. Sword aptitude 170%, spell aptitude 170%, even more traits were displayed below. 10% proc rate for critical attack, plus 10% increase in critical damage, plus 20 agility, plus 20 intelligence. 20% increase in attack speed. Usable skill, impending night falls. Conditions are not met, skill unavailable. It was terrific. The finest weapon. No matter how much of a noob gamer Gufei was, he could still tell how powerful the sword was based on its traits. Even Sword Demon's Frost Memories dagger, which Gufei had once considered as the finest weapon so far, paled in comparison to this sword right here. Although Frost Memories was fine, it was just gold tier equipment in the end. Moonlit Night Falls, on the other hand, was purple tier equipment. Purple tier equipment was the strongest gear in Parallel World if treated as a standalone item. The only one stronger than it was green tier equipment. But green tier equipment came in a set. Thus, players had to collect each piece and activate the hidden traits first before the green tier equipment could unleash its full potential. Therefore, green tier equipment was inferior to purple tier equipment in terms of individual use. Look at my sword. Gufei excitedly shoved the sword to Ziu so that she could admire it as well. Whoa! Ziu exclaimed as she looked at the sword before asking, sword aptitude, spell aptitude. What do they mean? No idea. Gufei replied, but they must be incredible. Why? Because you can't see these words on the usual weapons. Gufei took out Sacred Flames of Baptism and checked its traits once more. Sure enough, the word aptitude was missing on the traits window. That's rad. Ziu returned the sword to Gufei. I want to do a quest like this as well. You will get your chance. Gufei patted Ziu. Both our quests are done, Ziu said as they left the stout werewolf's house. Just as they stepped outside the door, a beam of white light enveloped Gufei. What happened? Ziu was startled into pulling out her axe. Chill. Gufei said to her immediately, I'm fine. It's just a level up. What's with the sudden level up for no apparent reason? Ziu asked. Gufei glanced over at the system notification. The system had sent Gufei a message when they exited the stout werewolf's house. Completed the chain quest Eddie's mission with a rate of 95%. Experience points and coins rewarded. Apparently, the experience points Gufei had acquired were enough for him to reach level 31. I've earned plenty of experience points. Gufei was dumbfounded. The rewards for this particular chain quest were simply too astronomical, including Flames of Baptism that had received a new trait after being plated with silver by Chief Edwin. Gufei received a total of 4 equipment and an unexpectedly hefty amount of experience points from this quest. On the other hand, the monetary reward was not that grand, as Gufei found that he had only gained 50 more gold coins upon checking his money pouch. That's a given. Yixiao, who was observing from afar, smiled dryly as he saw the shocked expression on Gufei's face. It would have been strange if the experience points given were insufficient to even raise one level of someone who had completed a chain quest beyond his league. Furthermore, the traits listed on the 2 final rewards, Spell Mastery, sword aptitude, and spell aptitude, had yet to be made available for the low-level gear equipped by the low-level players. Yi Xiaoyu was left speechless since Gu Fei had access to those traits now after acquiring that fine equipment from this chain quest. Yi Xiaoyu felt depressed when he saw Gu Fei's glum look upon obtaining the Midnight Spirit Robe. He really wanted to stab Gu Fei at that moment. He dared feel displeased with such an item. Luckily, Yi Xiaoyu calmed down once he saw Gu Fei's reaction upon obtaining the Moonlit Nightfalls. "Come on, let's go back," Ziyu urged. "Back to where?" "Yanjuan City." "I'm calling Master Kang," Ziyu replied. "Easy there." "We're not in a hurry," Gu Fei said. "We've put effort into trekking a mountain range for 3 hours just to reach this faraway city. Let's roam around some more first." "Don't you want to see what kinds of quests they have around here?" Ziyu's eyes beamed. "You've got a point. It's best if you accept a quest that requires you returning to Yanjuan City to complete it. That way, it's even more worthwhile for you coming here," Gu Fei rambled on with his silver tongue, while Ziyu kept on bobbing her head. Finally, she decided, "You're right. I've made up my mind to stay in Y City for a few more days." "Go ahead if you're leaving. There's no need to wait for me." "Well, I feel a little tired already. I'm logging off once I get into the city," Gu Fei said. The two left Yaguang village and headed to Y City. All the surrounding players in Y City behaved audaciously, just like the players in the local grinding zones. Gu Fei and Ziyu had already witnessed 4 or 5 different brawls while they traveled from Yaguang village to Y City. Those players were very brutal with their fights, never stopping until their opponents were dead. Gu Fei and Ziyu carefully went past them, trying not to get involved with the local brawls. The current Gu Fei was still bounded by the PvP penalties he had incurred previously. About 10 hours had passed since he went online in Yanjuan City. He still had 20 hours to go before he could clear off all his park points. It would be somewhat dangerous to enter a city at his current state, but Gu Fei did not give it much thought right now. The chain quest that he had completed gave him a thorough mental workout, and Ziyu, who was beside him all that time, did not actually contribute much aside from physical labor. Having been forced to rack his brain and ponder on for a long period of time, Gu Fei considered grinding a whole afternoon to be less exhausting. Hence, at the moment, he only cared about logging off and resting in reality. When the two entered Y City, Gu Fei immediately waved goodbye at Ziyu and headed toward a nearby player to inquire about the nearest log-off point. That player was quite taken aback upon hearing that Gu Fei had come from another city. So once the player had pointed Gu Fei toward the right way, the former also made his own inquiries on how to get to the city the latter originated. "There's no way of settling down in Y City anymore. It's too chaotic. It's one skirmish after another every single day. Nobody even bothers grinding once reaching level 30. All everyone does is PvP all day." "Why's that?" Gu Fei could not understand. "That's because level 30 is when everyone will need to accumulate a large number of experience points. Think about it. Imagine the experience points you now possess are equivalent to a mid-level 30. Once you get killed by others, the loss of points you'll suffer is equivalent to dropping from level 29 to level 25. Is it worth it?" Nowadays, all are afraid to suffer such a huge loss, so they refrain from grinding further. But they can't bear to watch others reach a higher level either. In the end, it turns into this endless cycle of PvP where everyone is trying to stop the others from leveling up further, the player explained to Gu Fei. "Can't believe there's such a thing here." Gu Fei was bewildered. "Well, we don't really have a choice when all are too afraid to grind over here. All we can do is hone our crafting skills." The players over here in Y City have very high crafting skills, by the way. So if you want to get yourself new equipment or procure some kind of medication, you've come to the right place, the player continued to brief Gu Fei on how things were locally, before he asked, "Oh, yeah, I forgot to ask you this. What's the name of the city you came from?" "Yanjuan City," Gu Fei answered. "Holy shit! Yanjuan City? The one with the close combat mage?" the player exclaimed. "Close combat mage? How can you not know?" "It's someone with a serial number 27,149. He's ranked first on the wanted players list of the bounty mission right now." Apparently, This person's a mage who allocated all his stat points toward agility and engages in close combat. Super rad. He managed to make short work of a thief and dropped his level 8 times. Hot dang. It's simply amazing. A player with such caliber should settle down here in Y City. I bet he'll fit right in. On the surface, it seemed like Gufei was keeping a straight face. Inside, a surge of emotions had risen. He was thinking about how he had nowhere to display his kung fu in reality, yet he had already caused quite a stir and gained countless admirers by simply unleashing a bit of it within this Vermo. Gufei considered kung fu as a weapon for fighting, and only in such a chaotic world could he receive the greatest form of respect for it. Gufei was lost in his thoughts about kung fu, while the player was lost in his thoughts about Gufei's attire. You said a while ago that the nearest log-off point is this way, right? Gufei asked while pointing at the street ahead. Yeah. I'll be on my way, then. See you around. Gufei parted ways with the player. Bye, the player said as he nodded. Gufei walked down the street. While looking at the departing figure, the player opened his mercenary group channel. I found an easy target. How easy? Someone asked on the channel. A black mage robe. Have you seen it before? The player asked. What kind of traits? Couldn't appraise it. The player answered. Fuck. Isn't your appraisal skill at rank 8 already? Damn you. Haven't you heard of the phrase, there's always someone better? It's not like rank 8 is the ceiling for this skill. The player replied indignantly. Even his appraisal has been honed to a rank higher than ours. Doesn't seem like he's just a regular guy. Do we have what it takes to mess with someone like that? Relax. It's not a problem. For some unknown reason, he came here from another city. He's all alone. Who else can we target but him? You lot better get moving. He's on his way to a designated log-off point. Which route did he take? The sea route. Fuck. Isn't that a long way to the safe zone? Doesn't change the fact that we still have to hurry up. I'll go after him now. The player entered stealth mode and slowly followed behind Gufei. Chapter 68, A bunch of idiotic robbers. Gufei continued walking down a paved road devoid of any pedestrians except for him. Out of boredom, he pulled out the sword, Moonlit Night Falls, from his dimensional pocket and gazed admiringly at it once more. As a kung fu practitioner, Gufei did not care much about his fashion. Yet he had a picky taste when it came to his weapon. He found that Moonlit Night Falls was to his liking, as its weight, size, shape, and design seemed to be custom made for him. Even in reality, he had never had a weapon that suited his taste this much. While Gufei was taking in the sword's beauty, a disturbance down the street reached his ears. A bunch of men, all brandishing a variety of weapons against one another, came into view from the street ahead. Before long, their chaotic fight filtered into the lane Gufei was in, with someone yelling out, "Don't let them get away." Gufei furrowed his brows. He had decided to take the shortcut indicated by that player from before due to laziness. The lane he was currently in could not exactly be considered as an alleyway but more like a narrow gap between two rows of houses. These people, who had brought their fight into this cramped walkway, effectively blocked the only way out. Gufei knew that even if he continued walking forward, they would not pause their fight just to let him through. Should he turn back? Gufei looked back and immediately felt exhausted just from seeing the distance back. Having no wish to backtrack, Gufei decided to keep going forward on the cramped walkway. While maintaining a firm grip around the hilt of Moonlit Night Falls with his right hand, he took out sacred flames of baptism with his left hand. In the blink of an eye, Gufei arrived at the scuffle. The combatants had of course noticed Gufei, but they gave off the vibe that they were slightly holding back as they clashed their weapons with one another. In contrast, Gufei appeared to have not noticed their presence as he plunged headlong through them. Be careful. A person on the left warned. The person was currently thrusting his dagger toward another person when Gufei forcibly squeezed his way through the gap between them. Despite shouting a warning, the person's hand did not stop its attack at all. Gufei did not bother about the person's contradicting action. He simply raised his left hand holding sacred flames of baptism to parry the stab as he passed through the gap between the pair. Gufei's next step brought him out of the two's range of fight. The shout this time came from a person on the right. He was swinging a claymore downward from above his head. Gufei did not dare forcefully block this swing from a player who seemed to be a warrior. As he was considering how he should deal with it, he noticed that the pair ahead had momentarily stopped exchanging blows. Gufei nimbly stepped forward, and the claymore narrowly brushed past his nape with a whoosh. At the next moment, Gu Fei lifted his two swords and blocked the attacks coming from both sides. Swiftly propelling himself forward with another step, he shunted past this pair as well. In an instant, Gu Fei had passed through three pairs of combatants unscathed by simply dodging and parrying. Placing moonlit nightfalls and sacred flames of baptism back into his dimensional pocket, Gu Fei dusted off his sleeves and folded his hands inside them. He then continued toward his destination without sparing the skirmish behind him another glance. After a bit, the fighting in the walkway had stopped as well, and the group of brawlers could be seen standing frozen on their spots. All their faces displayed a look of disbelief. They could not wrap up their minds around what had just happened. Where's that guy? Where did he go? Someone dazedly looked at his weapon as he tried to comprehend what he had just seen. Did he just walk through? Another asked for confirmation with a voice filled with incredulity. But how? Someone expressed his doubts as well. It was like this, then that, and then, ugh. This person tried to simulate Gu Fei's moves. The actions looked rather similar, yet the person suddenly clutched his waist with a pained expression. What's the matter? Everyone asked in shock. I twisted my waist. This particular move is rather difficult. You guys try it, too, the person wailed. Thus, everyone went about copying that particular move by Gu Fei. The end result was half of them not being able to do it and the other half spraining their waists from the overexertion of their muscles. The degree of their sprain varied on how much strength they had used. Ouch! Ow! Half of them gritted their teeth as they cried out in pain. What's the matter? A running figure suddenly appeared out of thin air. It was the guy who had earlier given Gu Fei direction. Due to his reduced speed while on stealth, he could only watch Gu Fei get further and further away. By the time he arrived into this walkway, Gu Fei's figure had long vanished from view. He immediately cancelled stealth when he saw all his buddies crying loudly in pain. Where did that guy go? How come he still escaped with so many of you here? He asked in shock. Half of the 10 ambushers in the walkway seemed to be suffering from injuries as well. Everyone felt flustered. They were tongue-tied on how to explain the situation. Should they say that they had unknowingly allowed Gu Fei to pass through them, or that their injuries were embarrassingly self-inflicted as they tried to recreate the earlier incident? What's that guy's job class? One of them asked as he tried to divert the topic. Yeah, what's his job class? He's got some strange moves. Gu Fei's unfathomable display made everyone assume that he possessed a special skill that none of them had yet. That guy? I think he's a mage, the guide, who had given Gu Fei direction, answered with uncertainty. Didn't you fail to appraise him before? Someone probed. Then, how sure are you that he's a mage? He's wearing a mage robe, right? The guide threw this question back. Wearing a mage robe doesn't guarantee that he's a mage. Everyone here thinks he's not a mage. Someone insisted. Agree. That guy's definitely not a mage. Come to think of it, what he's wearing may not even be a mage robe. It's black. Your appraisal failed on him as well, another chimed in. Since the game's open beta launching, there had yet to be a black mage robe. A majority of the players considered the mage and priest as wholesome job classes that would never be issued black attire by the system. In their minds, black attire was reserved for the thief job class, which sounded rather loathsome just from its name alone. The guide did not say anything for a beat, before finally commenting, if not a mage robe, then what? No one answered him, although someone commented, that guy's sword looks super rad. I've never seen anything like it before. Damn. What are we still gabbing about here for? Let's chase after him. Someone hollered to remind everyone of their goal. Let's. Quick. Show us the route he's taking. Another said as he pulled out a map. I directed him to this route, so he should be passing this way, the guide answered as he traced a certain path on the map with his index finger. But he's already seen us. He'll surely recognize us when he sees us again, someone commented. Guess we can't fake a scene anymore. Let's be straightforward about this, then, another suggested. The rest nodded their heads. Masks. Someone reminded. All excitedly pulled out a piece of triangular cloth, as a devout expression crossed their faces. We think that player in Yunjuan City who thought up of such an ingenious method to hide a player's identity. We'll now walk the path towards riches. A man recited with gravitas. Utmost gratitude. Everyone sincerely agreed. We're using this for the first time, So let's do our best. We don't want to be the laughingstocks of the players in Yunjuan City, the same man stated. All nodded their heads solemnly. Alright. The man pulled his buddies to huddle together, taking out a strip of paper with the numbers 27,149 written on it using large font. This is the benefactor who has paved the way for our group. Although we don't know his name or his appearance, his glorious record of attaining 15 park points in a few hours is forever etched in parallel worlds history. May he protect us. With that, he burned the slip of paper. All clasped their hands in front of them and silently said their prayers. Someone broke this solemn silence as he said, "Boss, I heard that guy do not pick up the dropped equipment after killing his target. We don't seem to be walking the same path as him. Don't worry about the minor details. Just accept it." The boss snapped. Everyone continued to pray until the ceremony ended. Gufei, who was hundreds of meters away, sneezed his loudest sneeze ever in game. "Can you guys really handle this mission?" The boss asked some of the gathered people. Half of them had the same posture, one hand holding a weapon and the other rubbing the waist. They were the few that had sprained their waists while trying to imitate Gufei's moves. "We're fine. It's the first time we're doing a masked operation. We'll definitely participate," the few said resolutely. "Very well," the boss nodded his head. "Everyone get ready." Masks. With that order from the big boss, all covered their faces with a piece of cloth. "Let's go. We'll show the players in Yunjuan City that we're Y-City's masked professionals," the boss bellowed. "Yeah." While the group of highwaymen set off in high spirits, the boss was furrowing his brows. Half of his followers had one of their arms akimbo, looking extremely ugly as they limped forward. They somewhat ruined the image of his mercenary group with their awkward movements. Suddenly, he thought of something. Does it matter? Everyone's wearing a mask, anyway. Wearing a mask is truly great. Can't lose our face even if we want to. The boss heaved a relieved sigh, as he once again praised the men who had come up with a method. "I'll add another piece just in case." The boss added another piece of cloth on top of the one currently covering his face. He felt pleased for coming up with something that their benefactor had not thought up of yet. As they rushed out of the walkway, the players on the street were immediately drawn to their astonishing sight. The group of highwaymen obviously understood the concept of not being able to lose face even if they wanted to, as they completely ignored the look everyone was throwing their way. Instead, they focused on following the path that they had previously discussed. "Who are these people?" a player asked curiously. "The Black Hand Mercenary Group," someone answered. "How did you know?" "Someone's wearing the mercenary group's emblem," he explained. "What's the point of masking themselves if their emblems can be seen? Are they stupid?" "Most likely." The group was steadily advancing forward when a player from a side alley grabbed one of them. "Coward, there you are. Didn't we make a deal that you'll get me 2 bandage rolls yesterday? Hand them over." "I'm no coward," the man's voice stated calmly. "I know. Your name's Coward's Savior. 2 words or one too many." "Coward is just easier and nicer to say," the player mocked. "How did you know it's me?" Coward Savior asked, feeling shocked. "I recognized your equipment." "What are you lot up to, anyway?" "None of your business," Coward Savior retorted. He then bitterly reported on the mercenary channel. "Boss, I've been exposed. To think you couldn't even hide your identity." "I'm sorry but you're not qualified to be a part of this special mercenary group," the boss remarked coldly. A cruel system prompt sounded next. "Coward Savior has been kicked out from the Black Hand Mercenary Group. Damn, I'm going to fuck you up." Coward Savior tore off his mask and dove straight for the player who had revealed his identity. "Don't bother with him. Let's continue onward," the boss ordered the few hesitant players. "Boss, I have that guy in my line of sight." "He's just right ahead," one of the players in front reported. "All right, break up. We'll surround him stealthily. Don't let him reach the safe zone." "This is our last chance," the boss commanded. "Go, go, go." Someone shouted and everyone split up. Chapter 69, Gu Family's sword-style Gufei passed through the walkway and got onto the street. The designated log-off point was just ahead. As he was proceeding to it at a leisure pace, he sensed movement from the side. He swept his gaze over that area and saw a shadowy figure brushing past him. The figure got into an alleyway just in front and peeked out half of his head from behind a column of a wall. Gufei noticed that the figure was looking directly at Where did this person come from? Gu Fei looked back at the way he had come from and saw in time two heads swiftly ducking behind a wall corner. Gu Fei faced forward for a bit, and then he abruptly faced backward again. Once more, he spotted the two heads swiftly ducking behind the wall corner. Gu Fei felt miserable. Was it too much to ask for peace? He simply could not have peace wherever he went. This phrase really held truth. As long as there are men, there will be a Jianghu. Gu Fei pulled out his newly acquired sword. The moonlit night falls while mulling over these words. Saber one and sword were often associated with each other. There was an adage, whereas a saber is a ferocious tiger, a sword is a soaring phoenix. Although the saying sounded nice, it actually inferred that a sword was the more elegant weapon between the two as it focused on skill and technique utilization. At the same time, this adage emphasized that a sword's pragmatic use and destructive power were inferior to a saber's in a combat. A saber relied on slashes and chops to attack, whereas a sword depended on thrusts. It went without saying which of these two weapons had the greater offense and was more wielder-friendly. Slashing and chopping were usually done with the sharp edge of a blade, regardless if it was a saber or a sword. But since a sword had two edges, forging it was much more complex and delicate. The process itself could lower the blade's resistance to impact. Hence, the sword's popularity on the battlefields was soon eclipsed by the sabers. Eventually, swords were reduced to mere decorative items, which served as a symbol of status. The adage, "A scholar carries a sword, a warrior wields a saber," originated from this. Naturally, Gu Fei's purpose for learning Kung Fu was not to fight on a battlefield. He had dabbled in a variety of Kung Fu fields for the sake of mastering it. Gu Fei had of course learned basic sword techniques ever since he was a child. There was a famous line among martial arts practitioners, "Changing a style is easy, but changing the strength required for different styles is not." A man who specialized in offensive, ferocious Kung Fu moves would find it hard to adapt to a Kung Fu like Tai Chi, which utilized gentle, defensive moves. The same principle applied to alternating between a saber and a sword. Actually, Gu Fei was seen by his family as a gifted individual precisely because of his adaptability to the different styles of martial arts. Gu Fei had shown outstanding aptitude toward all sorts of Kung Fu fields since he was young. This had caused his family to obsessively nurture him into a walking Kung Fu encyclopedia. They had drilled into his head all types of knowledge pertaining to Kung Fu. So while Gu Fei might not be proficient in their use, he was at least knowledgeable about them by the time he had reached the age of 22. Gu family's sword style was fairly well known in the Kung Fu community. The old fogies in Gu Fei's family even mentioned multiple times how it had been passed down for generations, with quite a few of their talented ancestors expanding and improving it over time. In any case, the original sword style manual, which was rumored to be in the form of a bamboo scroll, had been preserved well at their ancestral house. Sadly, Gu Fei did not get the chance to lay eyes on it, as his father had just given him a disc by the time it was his turn to learn the sword style. His father said that it was time to do things the 21st century way since it was already the 21st century. As for that legendary bamboo scroll, his father told him to wait until he was at the helm of the family. He would have the right to see it by then. Laying eyes on that mysterious bamboo scroll had been his ultimate goal when he was young. But as he grew older, the curiosity in him ebbed away and transformed into indifference toward it. Realistically speaking, learning from the bamboo scroll was not comparable to learning from a disc. Could humanity still be considered progressing? Otherwise, the ambushers did not reveal themselves even when he took out moonlit nightfalls from his dimensional pocket. Nevertheless, Gu Fei met a fist holding the hilt of the sword pointing downward with his other open hand too and bowed. He called out, "Come on out. I can see all of you." Two masked men flashed out from behind the wall upon hearing his words. But before Gu Fei could speak a word to them, a pair of hands swiftly pulled the two back inside. At the same time, Gu Fei could hear a voice berating the two, "You gullible fools. He's only bluffing." Gu Fei did not know whether to laugh or cry at that. At the same time, He felt that this bunch was much cuter than No Smile. The group of highwaymen collectively held their breath as they looked all around them. Not one of them revealed themselves anymore. The players walking on the street suddenly disappeared as well. Even those who had intended to take the route swiftly gave it a wide berth after seeing what was about to happen from afar. One quality that the players of Y City bested the players of Yunjuan City was their professional attitude. While Yunjuan City's players would crowd around a fight like a litter of curious kindergarten children, Y City's players would do the opposite for their life preservation. The whole street abruptly became quiet. A gentle breeze whisked away a few dried leaves that lay by Goofei's feet. The spiraling leaves had a sort of dramatic effect to the scene. It was just too bad that this somber atmosphere got ruined by the people's somewhat comical dialogues. Feeling exasperated, Goofei repeated, "I can really see all of you. If you're not coming out, I'm leaving. I'm off." Since he was aware of the masked men's hiding places, he naturally knew which way would be deserted. Goofei strode toward an alley by his side that had no one lying in wait. The group of masked men was dumbfounded. Their target was a few steps away from entering their entrapment. "He's just walking away. That's too shameless." Everyone was awash with grief and indignation. A good leader was able to adapt to any unexpected situation and welcome a challenge. The Black Hand Mercenary Group's leader did exactly that. He revealed himself without a care in the world and hollered, "Wait." Goofei turned his head and saw that all the masked men hiding behind the nearby wall corners, atop ledges, and behind doors had come out. It was a rather awkward sight to behold. What was originally an encirclement had now turned into a direct confrontation, with Goofei at one side and the group at the other. "Who are you people?" Goofei asked as he took a step back. "The Black Hand Merc, ugh." The person who answered Goofei's question was heavily slapped by another person beside him. The leader stared at the speaker sternly as well. The group would look pathetic if he was to kick this idiot out of the group straight away, so he restrained himself from doing so. "What's up?" Goofei asked. No one dared reply to Goofei this time. The boss simply waved his hand and everyone lunged toward Goofei. The game had different job classes with different fortes, after all. Right now, the ones rushing toward Goofei possessed melee job classes. He swept his eyes over the surging tide of players and saw many warriors among them. Warrior was the job class Goofei was most wary of. Firstly, a warrior's heavy attack was not something Goofei dared to block forcefully. Secondly, Goofei's attack was significantly ineffective against a warrior since he or she wore heavy armor. Alongside the rushing warriors were the thieves. These players craftily hid using stealth behind the warriors, thinking that Goofei was not aware of their ploy. Goofei of course had a fairly good estimate of where they were, he just could not sense their exact positions or numbers due to the chaotic environment. While the warriors and thieves were rushing toward Goofei, the mages and archers from afar unleashed their attacks on him. Their teamwork is amazing. Goofei could tell at least this based on his accumulated melee combat experiences in games so far. The archers' arrows, some on snipe and the rest on double shot, arrived first. The archer's arrows on snipe would have posed a serious challenge to Goofei had this ambush been staged an hour earlier. Right now, however, he had Moonlit Nightfalls and a higher level. Goofei's recent level up had allowed him to add more stat points into agility, which improved his speed by leaps and bounds. So by tilting his body sideways, Goofei was able to dodge the arrows whizzing by effortlessly. As for the mage's fireballs, he could not dodge those with a simple twist of his body as they were able to slightly track his movements. Thus, he ran across the PvP field and caused the fireballs to lose their target. "This won't do," Goofei anxiously thought to himself. The situation unfolding before his eyes was different from what had happened in Yunjuan City. The warriors in front were acting as meat shields for their teammates, and Goofei stood no chance against them when it came to frontal assault. Unfortunately, he must break through their defenses to eliminate the mages and archers in the rear. Aside from this bunch of attackers, there were still the thieves on stealth to consider. Those guys were definitely waiting for an opportunity to strike at him. Goofei suddenly recalled the ragged cloth tied to a bamboo pole that he had seen in one of Y City's grinding maps. The players currently attacking him were definitely tempered by group battles, as their solid formation showed the meaning of strength in numbers. "I can't face them head on," Goofei thought as he sprinted toward that alleyway he had chosen earlier. "Ah, he's fleeing again!" Someone from the mercenary group yelled. Earlier, Everyone had assumed that Gufei was trying to get away when he headed to that alleyway. However, against their expectation, he readily returned when their leader shouted, "Wait!" And right now, when he seemed to be taking on their group, he suddenly bolted away again. Why is he so unpredictable? He's so shameless. Everyone thought. Quickly pursue him. The boss ordered and everyone rushed to the alley. Gufei madly dashed forward for a bit. After a while, he faced backward and revealed a victorious smile. Gufei observed the group's formation slowly changing. This change was due to the opponent's varied speed in accordance to the stat point allocation. While the formation was still orderly, the composition itself had changed. The ones running ahead of the pack were now the thieves on fleet foot. If the job classes were to be ranked based on speed, an archer would be first, a thief would be second, a knight would be third, and a mage would be fourth. The knight job class in Parallel World had a very balanced stat point distribution, with nothing exceptionally good or bad. This resulted into a situation where the ideal stat allocation for knights to be undetermined. Some knights had focused on agility, which allowed them to run faster than mages. As for the mages, they were obviously not crazy enough to allocate most of their stat points into agility, unlike a certain guy. At the moment, the warriors were the slowest among the bunch of players chasing after Gufei. These mage shields had basically been demoted to rear guards along the way. Gufei kept looking back as he ran. The thieves on fleet foot were indeed amazing, gradually managing to catch up to him. The thieves chasing after Gufei saw him as a trapped mouse. Naturally, they never expected him to turn back and confront them. Gufei roughly measured the pace of the thieves behind him while silently counting, 1, 2, 3. Turn. Gufei suddenly stopped running away and turned around. He then wielded his sword and unleashed a horizontal chop, the first move in Gufei's inherited sword style, the Fuian chop. Chopping was not up the alley of a sword, yet Gufei's move actually brought the blade's specialty into play, its two sharp edges. Some said that the move should be executed while resembling a drifting cloud. This was to make the attack's trajectory be unpredictable to an opponent. Gufei as a young child did not understand this concept and simply thought that it sounded cool. Now that he was quite proficient at Kung Fu, he felt that this statement was somewhat nonsensical. If one wanted to chop an opponent, then one should just do so. Why should one waste energy coming up with a way to instill doubt about the cut's trajectory? The statement might still serve a purpose if a sword's two edges possessed a slight incongruity. And yet, a sword would be considered as defective if that were to be the case. Gufei reckoned that the move's creator must have been bullied a lot by saber wielders, prompting him to create a move that could not be executed using sabers. Whatever the case might be, Gufei's sword attack right now was like a drifting cloud, formless and unpredictable. The two thieves did not even have time to defend against that single chop and were swiftly cut quite deeply by it. The two cried as they retreated. Gufei followed his chop with a stab as he rushed toward them. Suddenly, the stab slowed down halfway and pierced a thief somewhere inconsequential instead. I still have some park points left from before. If I go on a killing spree, I'll never be able to clear them off. Gufei suddenly thought. Chapter 70, Showing Mercy. Gufei's 15 park points had dropped by 5 points after spending more than 10 hours in game. Currently, he was left with just 10 park points. But if he were to kill these players before him, his park value would surely reach a new height. The legend of 27,149 has been usurped by another legend of 27,149. That's just absurd, Gufei thought to himself. However, the more absurd thing here was that Gufei still did not know why these masked men were attacking him. They had barely spoken a word to Gufei, and then they immediately started raining attacks on him. The online gaming world was really too unreal. Nobody even needed an excuse to assault another person. Worried that his park value would increase, Gufei decided to let the viciously beaten thief go. Moonlit Nightfalls had a high damage output. This was more evident since his two opponents had the thief job class, which was known for its low HP, and could barely withstand Moonlit Nightfall's strikes. Right now, the thief on the right, who had been cut twice by the sword, was waiting for his impending doom by the next attack. When the attack from Gufei did not arrive, the thief hurriedly ran back to his group. What's the matter? At that moment, a few more members of the group had arrived at the alleyway. The sight that greeted them was of their buddy running toward their direction instead of chasing after Gufei. I almost got killed, the thief said in a shaky voice as he reached them. How? Everyone asked, feeling stunned. Thinking about Gufei's insanely fast running speed, they somewhat deduced that he had put a majority of his stat points into agility. The more experienced members of the group even concluded that Gufei was a knight, seeing as he was wielding a sword. This resulted into the person who had earlier said that Gufei was a mage to earn a few glares from his teammates. But even though the guy was a knight, he should not possess such a high damage output, especially since he had added most of his stats into agility. Therefore, the source of his monstrous strength should be that sword in his hand. Scary. If he'd used Blessing of Strength, I would have already been dead. The thief, who was left with just a sliver of HP, could feel his heart thumping fast at the thought. After a short while, the second thief, who had received Gufei's attack, made his way to the group as well. His face wore a terrified look as he howled, "Quick! Heal me!" However, all the priests were still far behind the group, as their job class had inherently low agility. How much of his HP did you reduce? Someone asked. Reduce, my ass. Only my HP got reduced. The thief snarled. Everyone looked at one another. Gufei was just right in front of them, yet no one dared to approach him after hearing their accounts. While they were standing there in a daze, a scream reached their ears from just ahead. A thief tried to attack Gufei by getting near him while on stealth. Unfortunately for the thief, Gufei had long known of his presence. Thus, he was easily taken care of in one or two moves by Gufei. The thief hurriedly scampered back toward his fellow mercenary members with barely a sliver of HP left. Archers! A thief shouted to the bunch of archers that had just arrived at the alleyway. Gufei no longer wished to tangle with this group of players. He turned around and started running toward the log-off point once more, fighting off a few persistent thieves along the way. Go, go, go! The thieves shouted their trademark battle cry as they pushed the archers forward. The archers chased after Gufei as they shot arrows at him. The archers were unable to use their current strongest skill, snipe, while moving, so most of them could only shoot normal arrows at Gufei. A few outstanding archers managed to fire off arrows using their low-level skill, Power Shot, which dealt a higher damage than a normal arrow. Unfortunately, Power Shot could not pose a threat to Gufei. He easily turned to a corner at the alley exit under their hail of arrows without getting hit even once. Don't let him escape. An archer who had added most of his stat points to agility was the closest to catching up to Gufei, and he yelled on to inspire the fellow mercenary members behind him. Leaning his body sideways, he leapt forward and drew the bow mid-air. Obviously, his shooting stance was more for the purpose of looking cool in front of his buddies than sending an arrow to Gufei. Actually, the system provided archers support when it came to shooting arrows. Since players even needed basic guidance regarding the bow's proper use, they would naturally require the system's assistance to shoot an arrow accurately. However, this did not mean that the system would thoroughly and always correct the player's aim. So when this archer attempted to shoot at such a difficult angle that even Olympic medalists would not dare try, the system harshly left him to his own devices. The archer managed to draw his bow at its full length mid-air, yet he could not locate his shooting target. Without a second thought, he still let loose an arrow. After all, he was just doing this to look cool in front of the others. What followed this shot was a chop that came out of nowhere. Gufei leaped downward with his two hands on moonlit night walls. The poor archer did not get to finish his cool move. While he did successfully leap in the air, his stance could only be considered perfect if he followed it up with a somersault. But before he could execute the last part of his performance, Gufei had already sent a slash his way, causing him to lose his balance and fall to the ground rather inelegantly. Too shameless. The archer thought to himself. So reckless. Gufei thought to himself. He had nearly gotten hit by that arrow. Stop. Beware of an ambush. The few archers following that ostentatious archer stretched out their hands to stop the ones behind them from proceeding forward. The flailing archer on the ground felt angry when he heard their warning. He was only lying on the ground and was not dead yet. How could they readily give up on him? He had just wanted to look cool earlier, yet he ended up testing the water for them. Fuck you all. Come save me, already. He yelled indignantly. The quick-witted players standing behind did not dare expose themselves even with his remark. They could see the archer's flailing legs near the alley exit, so one of the braver players dashed forward and caught the archer's flailing legs, dragging him back into the alley. Phew, that was a close call. The person praised himself, as he wiped non-existent sweat off his forehead with his hand. Had he acted any slower, the flailing archer would have been decapitated. Unfortunately, they could no longer determine Gu Fei's next direction now that all of them were staying hidden in this alleyway. Everyone waited for a few seconds before tentatively asking, "Is he still there?" Nobody dared to take a look. If the opponent was still behind that corner of the wall, then the first person to peek would have to fight with him. Could an archer survive a melee? Knocking an arrow, drawing a bow, and firing an arrow required time and preparation. Hence, any form of assault from the enemy could easily disrupt the shooting preparation of any average archer. "Retreat," someone whispered. A few of the mercenary members started edging backward. They could at least put some distance between them and Gu Fei by doing so. "I'll count to 3 and we'll all rush out together. This way, he won't know which one to cut down," a person suggested. "Good idea. 1, 2, 3, go, go, go," the person yelled, hoping to unnerve Gu Fei with their trademark battle cry. "Fuck me, where is he?" Gu Fei's figure could not be seen anywhere when they finally exited the alleyway. There was quite a distance between the two ends of the adjoining alley. Gu Fei could not possibly reach its other end and turn to another direction in just a short while. The archers were stumped. When the thieves finally caught up to them, they all analyzed the situation and still could not figure out how Gu Fei had disappeared. Did he forcefully log off? Someone speculated. It was possible to forcefully log off from the game. However, it was dangerous, so almost no one dared to do so. The game officials had stated before that some progress might not be saved if the players forcefully logged off. As for how much progress would be left unsaved, nobody actually knew. The mages and warriors that had just arrived tried to join in on the search as well. And yet, all of them did not know where to begin the search. They all stared blankly at the deserted alleyway in front of them. "Attention to all divisions," the leader said on the mercenary group channel. "Our target has mysteriously vanished. Immediately report it if you see him." Those who were present over there entered the adjoining alleyway and examined it. Suddenly, someone shouted, "Ah, he probably went up the rooftop." Everything suddenly made sense to them. The houses lining up this alleyway were not exactly tall. The walls on both sides were not far from each other as well, making it easy for someone to climb up them by spreading his arms and legs sideways and shimmying upward. The man, who had mentioned this point, demonstrated it himself. Easily managing to scale the walls and get onto a rooftop, he looked around and said, "I don't see anyone up here. I think he's run off far away already. Don't worry. As long as he's in Y City, we'll definitely capture him sooner or later," the group leader said confidently. At this point, the thieves that had taken quite a beating from Gu Fei began to describe his swordplay. "He halved my HP with just one strike." "Who said he's an all-agility player? I almost got insta-killed by his normal attack." "Fuck, if he's a warrior, one attack is enough to insta-kill me," a player said. The Black Hands group leader happened to be a warrior. Upon hearing about the sword's high damage output, he became more spirited in his search. He repeated his orders on the mercenary channel to keep searching for a man wearing a seemingly black mage robe. 7 minutes later, the leader received a report. Someone saw a similar individual entering a safe zone and going offline. "Which safe zone is that?" the leader asked his members. "Zone A in the Knights Barracks," someone answered. "Monitor that place and shifts. We must not let that guy get away," the leader ordered. If the target was an average player, he would call this hunt off to not waste any more of their time. But knowing that Gu Fei possessed a top-grade sword, he could not just let him go. "Someone head over there and keep an eye on things. The rest of you, head over to 6th Night Tavern, drinks are on me," the leader declared grandly. The group gathered in 6th Night Tavern as they waited for Gu Fei to come online. Gu Fei prepared to sleep after going offline. As he was lying in bed, he started to mull things over. Once Gu Fei had decided to kill No Smile, he truly hunted the latter until No Smile went offline. One could say that Gu Fei was not able to keep things bottled up inside him for long. At the moment, everything he was doing in Parallel World felt a bit troublesome due to his park value. It was as if there was fish bone lodged in his throat and he could not get rid of it no matter what. This feeling of discomfort more or less summed up his view of his present ordeal. And it had only gotten worse after logging off. Gufei knew that this quirk of his would be diagnosed by doctors as a minor case of obsessive-compulsive disorder. Right now, he forcefully tried to go to sleep by telling himself to forget about his current dilemma. When Gufei went online the next day, the only difference in-game was that some drunk men now littered the Sixth Night Tavern. "I bet that guy'll show himself in the next hour," one of them said with glazed eyes. "Yeah, that bastard, making us wait for a whole day and night. We're definitely not letting him off." The person used in-game time as measure when he made this remark. The person who was stationed outside the log-off point had brought several bottles of liquor with him as well. He drank the liquor in all of the bottles as he waited for Gufei's appearance. So by the time Gufei strutted out and stood in front of him, he had long fallen asleep coiled up in a fetal position by a wall column. Since spending time in the safe zone could reduce his park value as well, Gufei did not hurriedly get out. He had a matter that he needed to make sure of, and he could only accomplish this undisturbed within the safe zone. Before logging into Parallel World, Gufei had tried searching for information on the game's official website regarding the unfamiliar terms spell mastery, sword aptitude, and spell aptitude, yet he came up with nothing. With no other options, he could only bother Fleeting Smile again.